Hello and welcome to the Fireforge Leader Podcast, where I and my guest today will be sharing lessons learned in the frontline forges of leadership. Today we're going to be doing something special. By the time this podcast launches, we're going to be honoring the men and women of this great country who made the deliberate choice to leave behind what they knew, venture into the unknown, and choose a path of something much bigger than themselves. So going on that a little bit, we live in a really blessed country where we get to choose our religion, our politics, where we send our kids to school at, if we decide to send them to school or homeschool them instead. We also get the choice of who we get to lead us, as well as if we believe that military action is right or wrong. But let's put all that aside for a minute and just get down to it. Because no matter where you sit on any one of those issues, the men and women who chose to join the military branches out there, they defend every one of those freedoms, regardless of the side that you sit on. So with that, I'd like to welcome the two guests that I have in here today. We have Theodore Karagias, I think I said that right, and David Body, who's a little bit easier to say.
Body, actually.
Oh, Body. Dang, I missed that one.
It's normal.
Did you change it just because you got really fit? Just wondering.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves here in a little bit, but I want to really level set on the mission of why we're all together to start with. So the first thing that I'm really going to address with these gentlemen is, in my career, I've seen a lot of military people come and go. Some of them have been just rock stars right out of the gate. And then I've also seen some that have not done so hot. They've really lost in the civilian war. And I want to talk about the reasons why that is, because I don't see a lot of people in the middle. The second thing that I want to address is really the differences in between the leadership in military and the leadership in the civilian world. And then finally, bringing it all back together to talk about how do we help these men and women coming out of the military, as well as the businesses that they might be joining, so that they can partner in a successful relationship. Sound easy enough? Maybe.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's go ahead and start with Ted. You are in the military. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of background, what branch you served in, how many years, and if you've done anything with it since?
Absolutely. So I started in 2005. I went through ROTC. So I went as an officer into aircraft maintenance. And I chose aircraft maintenance because it was one of the career fields that you get to lead almost instantly. So pilots don't start leading people until they're becoming captains 4, 5, 6 years in. A lot of the career fields you may manage, lead a very small team. Aircraft maintenance within a year, I was leading a team of 154 people. And so that was something that was extremely exciting to me. Additionally, since I couldn't fly them because of my eyes, I figured I might as well fix them. Spent just shy of 4 years on active duty. And then I took about a year off, joined the reserve, where I then deployed twice, once to Afghanistan and once to Qatar. When I left the military, I actually found a great organization, at the time, it was a Fortune 50 company, I believe, that was looking to hire leaders. And so they were going to veteran hiring events they're like, we can teach you to make our product. What we can't teach is the leadership. So found myself in a very unique situation right off the start. And then I continued to serve until 2016. So I had just shy of 11 years in total.
Wow. Nice. Thank you for that service. How about you, David Body?
So I've actually spent the majority of my adult life as an arborist, cutting trees. Always wanted to join the military, really strongly felt that desire to serve my country. Just dreamed about it as a kid. circumstances when I got out of high school. I ended up getting married young and things like that. Just kind of kept me from really stepping into it. So I finally enlisted in the Army National Guard at 31 years old, ripe old age of 31. And went infantry, was in the sniper section for a bit, and then kind of took a little bit of time as a intel analyst, and then currently now working in a special operations community. Now working forward towards more of that, get to do some cool stuff there. So kind of a late bloomer for me, but looking forward to a good bit of time there. And then part of what I have done over the last few years is work for an organization working with veterans, and we can get into that a little bit later. But that's honestly one of the big pieces in my life as well, with the military kind of weaving together with some other stuff. So we can definitely get into that.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I know the organization, Operation Restored Warrior. So tell us a little bit about that and what draws you to that organization.
Yeah, I started, I was in men's ministries and things for years. I go to church, heavily involved in different things over the years, and struggling, dealing with different things, and was really wondering, like, how do we reach them? And when I ended up joining the military, I also had a good friend who still is with Operation Restored Warrior. And he said, hey, man, you're in the military. You can come check out the program. And so I went through the program, and it's a biblically based program that takes veterans, law enforcement, and first responders. They've now since opened it up to more. And take you on a 5-day journey just to dive in. If you're familiar with Wild at Heart, John Eldridge type stuff, similar language. It was actually born out of Paul Lavelle, who started Operation Restored Warrior, used to work for John Eldridge, and ended up stepping out and starting a program specifically for the military. And it's just an incredible, life-changing program, very, very incredible to be a part of. So I was a facilitator for a couple years, and then also worked for them full-time, running a podcast and doing things like that. But just an incredible program. You don't even have to be a Christian or go to church to go. It's biblically based, but you can go through there, and it is some of the deepest healing that anybody will find out there and experience. And it's not something you have to pay a bunch of money for either. You pay for travel to get there and back. Got a chef, good food. It's a really, really incredible program. And even for guys who aren't struggling, just to be able to go and experience it, everyone that's in the military certainly knows people that are struggling. And if you, even if you're not in the military at this point, we've been at war for so long, everybody knows somebody who's a veteran that's struggling. And so it's a great idea if you qualify to go check it out. And then you have firsthand experience to then invite other people that you know really need help to go through. And so it's www.operationrestoredwarrior.org.
Nice. Thank you. So it sounds like the organization really connects people in the military back to value at some point, or back to a path to, restore the warrior, right? And is a path back into civilian life.
Mm-hmm. Because most of the time, and you're talking about your first topic, you're seeing how there's some veterans that cut out of the military and they're just killing it. And then there's some that are just dive bombing. Well, so often, and Ted can speak to this a lot better than I can because he was active duty, that's your life. And then all of a sudden you get out, and what's your purpose now? Who am I? What am I supposed to do? Your identity, might be what you did in the military, might be your rank, but often you're so wrapped up in that. And so there's just this loss of purpose. And let's face it, in the Christian community, often that idea of being a warrior and a man's man is not what we're preaching for men. And so to go and feel strengthened in that yes, I am a warrior. God made me to be a warrior. These desires in me are good, focused in the right direction. And then to experience God speaking truth into them and calling them into purpose, it's immensely powerful. And there's guys coming in there literally like gun in their mouth days before, and their life just completely turns around by the end of the program. And then there's that brotherhood piece after, where the guys you attended with and then also the greater alumni group. That again, kind of going in, you get out of the military, a lot of guys are like, man, I just miss the brotherhood. I miss the camaraderie of being in the military and with my brothers. And you can get that as well.
Right. So if I remember right, Ted, 11 years in, and your marriage really started shortly after that, right? Or
So
right about
my second marriage started shortly after that. So it takes its toll, being gone, being going for the weekend duties and then going away for a couple deployments. It can definitely kind of wear on you, and finding the right person is extremely important. And so I actually waited a little bit longer than Dave did. I did not get married till I was in my mid to late 20s, actually right before I deployed on my first deployment. But since then, have a wonderful family, beautiful wife, couple kids, and it's amazing though the difference in support, right? So if you get strong support at home, it really does start translating to strong support in everything you do, and that is a huge life altering thing that a lot of times you don't see until you make a conscious decision to make a change, and then if things happen the way they just happened for me, you get lucky, and it really starts to alter in so much of a positive way.
Oh, 100%. So if I remember the front of the magazine that you just recently posted, you have a wife, two beautiful daughters, and then a son who looks a lot like you with hair.
couple step kids in there, a couple step kids, but we like to just say kids, of course, because we do see ourselves as one. Then we have the two beautiful puppies as well. They're definitely not young anymore, but yes. And we got married in 2019, and so we were a blended family, and finding a way to make that work while working school for. But I am no longer in the military, so there's one thing off my back.
So did you have a hard time transitioning, like some of the people that David was talking about, after 11 years in and a couple of deployments and a previous marriage, coming out, looking for that purpose, figuring out who you were again?
So coming out of active duty after just shy of 4 years, that one was a little bit more difficult. So as Dave said, you do have that camaraderie. We were so tight knit within our aircraft maintenance unit that we were doing things together every weekend. We were camping, we were hiking, because we were out in Phoenix, hiking mountains and just taking road trips to Vegas and San Diego. Coming out, it's not quite that tight knit, and you don't have the same. I will say though, moving into manufacturing, when your hair is all on fire, that's why I don't have any anymore as a aircraft maintenance, and you're trying to keep these planes, ready to fly at a moment's notice, right? And going into manufacturing, you don't take your foot off the gas as much, and so it's a good thing and a bad thing, because actually I worked with a person, Steve, with you. He left the military, aircraft maintenance, but went straight into maintenance. And he very quickly realized in the civilian world, maintenance in the civilian world is just like maintenance, and he had retired. So he was basically burned out, right? And so then he decided to go with something exactly like he was doing in the military. And he ended up leaving the company very quickly because he just burned out. He was already burned out. For me, coming into an organization, I was very lucky. I will say I used, Bradley Morris and Lucas Group, which are both veteran transition programs where the companies pay them to bring you on. And so I was going through these hiring events where I'd interview 8-9 companies, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, some smaller ones. And that really did smooth the transition. The hiring, the HR manager, he and I are still very, very close. He's now become a CFO of other companies and everything. He's done very well, but he was a huge military supporter, had military family. And with him, it made it a little bit smoother of a transition into the organization. Now, you get in the organization, you kind of just get, depending on who your boss is and who your team was. My first boss was not the best, but the resiliency, the discipline that I had learned through sports growing up, through school, from my parents, and then solidified in the military, that discipline to and learning how to navigate difficult leaders. And my first one I would definitely not call a leader. He was a manager, but learning how to navigate through that was something that really helped me through the transition. And then it came back and helped me on my second deployment. I thought I was getting sent home, and finding a way to be able to navigate it. So it's amazing. The difficult thing though is transitioning when you're a reservist, like Dave is, and like I was for a while, transitioning from one, going back and forth on weekends and then back again. It can be difficult, but the great thing about the Air Force for me is we really focused on collaboration. It wasn't a top down, you do as I say type of thing. It was all on collaboration. That was what we considered success. If we can collaborate, because we had a continuous improvement mindset within the aircraft maintenance world. And so it was a smoother transition than many of my counterparts have had.
Right. So David, how about you? Transitioning back and forth and being an arborist and
it's as he's saying, it's not easy, because especially as a father, 3 kids, married, trying to navigate that, if you're active duty, it's hard. It's hard for the family, especially if you're deploying some of my friends that deploy just consistently over and over again. That's really tough. But for me, it's like I get in my work pattern. I'm doing that for a while, then transition. Okay, now I'm going to be in the Army for maybe it's a couple days. Cool. But a lot of these different units I've been in, whether it's the sniper section or my current unit, we're talking 4 days, a week, extra training, schools. So then you're also trying to navigate, showing up and being a good soldier for that. Any type of prep that you need to do, I have a whole CD of stuff I'm prepping for an event, 3-week event in January. I've got another event coming up in December, and so I'm trying to prep for that on top of everything I'm doing at home, anything that I need to do for work, and to some degree, it's a blessing with tree work. Tree work's pretty simple. I show up, I do my work, I come home, so it's not. Doesn't carry over that much, but yes, it's constant stress of being gone. And then, like my wife will say, sometimes I'll come back from being out in the field for 3 weeks, and it's like, hey, quit talking to me like you're like I'm one of the boys. You just get in that mindset. You're out there, you're in that warrior mindset, and then you gotta be able to transition, and that's not easy, especially if you're not getting a lot of good interaction with other men in general. So you're finally out there getting interaction with other guys. You're out there in the field. You're having a good time. And now you got to try to rear that back and engage your life. It's tough. It can be very difficult. I think you learn to set in some processes in the transition. That's what I've been learning, is just to kind of pause. And my goal has been to I talk about the 4 faces of manhood: the warrior, the king, the lover, and the friend. And a wise man transitions well between each of those. So how do I transition from one to the other? Well, I'm coming home. I need to pause and kind of actively actually think about, like, man, I'm coming home after 2 weeks in the field with all these dudes. What do I got to do to be able to transition well? Or leadership, you're talking about leadership. How do I come home and now I'm a manager over here, or I'm a crew lead for a tree crew? I can't knife hand and yell at my guy anymore because this isn't the military. It's a totally different style to some degree. And so being able to kind of pause, like, all right, what space am I going into? And, I think everybody comes up with different ways to kind of do that pause in that transition, but it's very important.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask how you physically do those transitions and be successful at it. So the first thing's pause. Are there any other any things after the pause? Is it just pause and then put the process in place, or?
So the pause is a bit of a process on itself. I'm a John Eldridge fan. I have literally the Pause app. And it is a meditation. You can go anywhere from a minute to up to over 10 minutes. So that'll literally be something where I center myself and just remind myself of who I am. But then, being an Iron Council member, I have a vision. that I'm constantly pushing for. And I love my vision. It motivates me. And a big part of that is all the areas of my life. So I have a little index card that I've written out kind of the key points of my vision. I've got it as a backdrop on my phone. I got it in my truck on my visor. And I will pause literally before I go in the door from work and remind myself, who am I? And in there is something in each category. So if I'm coming home, I'm going to be patient with my kids. I'm going to love and listen to my wife. Things like that to help me transition from like, yes, I was here. Now, okay, this is how I show up for my family, or this is how I show up for work. Pause, centered. Now I'm going to read that through to myself and just remind myself who I am at home, or whatever category I guess you could say that I'm going into.
And I don't really see that. I don't really see that just in the military either. I know people who are different people at home than they are at work. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things that it's good because it's not just a military thing. I think that's something that, many people can learn from. So
that's a great point. That's a great thing to do, just coming home from work before you can walk in the door.
I agree. That's probably some of these VPs and everybody else who gets really stressed out at work, right? And then have failed marriages at home. That's probably what they're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, Ted. So do you have a similar tactic, Ted, that you work through to make sure that you're a certain way at home and a certain way at work and school and military?
So since I joined the Men of War, I've really focused on meditation, right? And so that's something that I did not do. When I was younger, I actually seem to have a much smoother transition for it. As I get older, for some reason, it has to be more focused, more concerted effort. And I think part of it is probably because the stress is, there's more going on, it never slows down. And so to me, the meditation portion, and again, that can be in any form. It can be in the car, just like David said, it's forcing yourself to remember where you're going and why you're there. Right. And then that why is so important. And, for me, the why when I'm going home is to, be the leader of my family, but in service to my family. Right. And when I'm going to work, I am leading a team. I'm in service to the team, but it's a different type of leadership and service. Right. And so trying to constantly keep those in balance and focusing on which one you're transitioning to is extremely important.
Yeah. The goals are really different. The mission's the same, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So if we look at the other side of that, you guys are really similar in your thought patterns and how you do those transitions. So if we look at the opposite side of that and the people who have not been successful in this arena, right, that come out of the military and aren't successful, what do you see in them? Ted, what do you think?
Well, a couple of things I've noticed. So I actually have spent a lot of time requesting or putting it out there saying, hey, if you are a veteran and you are transitioning, or if you're even just a veteran, you're looking for a new job, I help with doing resumes, interview prep, because I've been a hiring manager for a couple companies now, right? And so I really try to focus on that. And what I've noticed through these interactions is a lot of times the people who were in for a short period of time, just their 4 years or 6 years, and then they leave, they don't quite know what they want to do yet. And so they don't get enough information for the roles that they're getting into. They're kind of running in, they're just kind of find, what they think they might like, right? Instead of really truly understanding what it is they're walking into. And so no matter what position they're going into, they're going to be frustrated. And so even these practices are going to be extremely difficult for them. And on the opposite side, I know I'm kind of going back to your first question, but there was something I was thinking of that I didn't get to cover, was just the fact that then the ones who are retiring, a lot of times they want to do the same exact thing they did, and then they've been burned out over the 20-something years. And the ones that I've seen that have been that have really struggled for success, it's because, yes, they know what they're doing, but they're already burned out by it. And so the two different spectrums is quite interesting. So I think that as you start to get into those roles, the key will just be, the key is the same, whether you're transitioning from the military to the real world, to the civilian world. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that I don't think is taught very much. And most people are not going to go and take the time to learn it. And that's a huge miss on their part, because I didn't take meditation seriously until relatively recently. But at the same time, I still had the concepts of being able to prioritize, compartmentalize, when I'm transitioning from piece to piece. And I've learned that through being very deliberate in my, what am I going out there to learn, and what am I bringing in from people that I work with. So, if I knew Dave when I was younger, it probably would have been a great thing, because I would have learned some of these things even at an earlier age, right? We think the warrior mindset is just, hair on fire, don't ask for help, don't show weakness, right? And we asking for help is not weakness. Asking people for their opinions and then actually listening and heeding it, putting together action plans, and how are you going to implement what you're learning is a key piece that I think is missing.
Agreed. So, it's amazing, because almost every conversation, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, right? If you want something to go well, it's vision, it's mission, it's really marching tactics, right? And just being set on that end goal. So going back to, well, we've all touched on it, right? What's my purpose, right? That's stated in the vision. It's stated, I can't remember what you called it, Ted, but it was a little bit different than vision, but it's the same thing, right? You know where you want to be, where you're going. So is it safe to say that the people who fail are really missing that key component?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think there's two pieces that you see. Number one, there's just the complete loss of purpose. I literally don't know what to do now. I don't have those men around me that I used to lean into. There's this complete loss of purpose. Or it can kind of be the opposite, where it's like, I am, bullheaded. I'm this awesome military veteran, and I'm going to come in here and show you guys how it's done. And there's no real purpose there. There's no real vision there. It's just this bravado. And so you kind of see either end. Yeah, exactly. You see these either ends of the spectrum where guys are coming out, and I have a friend of mine who is a Marine for a long time. Is a Marine. Sorry. He's always a Marine. But he was a Marine, got out, and his first civilian job, he is literally knife handing and screaming at people because that's the only thing he knows. And he's like, what's wrong with that? HR's calling him in. Dude, you can't talk to people like that. And some guys, they think, well, you just can't handle this. Like, this is real leadership. This is real manhood. And so I feel like you kind of fall into two different sides of the spectrum, where you can be just complete loss of purpose, which is usually where depression comes in, laziness, they're not showing up to work, alcohol. In the military, the alcohol consumption is just a huge thing, especially if you start getting into, some of the guys who've really, been on some brutal deployments and things, and they've got all kinds of memories they're trying to wash out too. I've seen that quite a bit, but either way, there's all that going on because they just have this complete loss of purpose. Or on the other side, you got no vision, and kind of like Ted mentioned, it's like hair on fire, you're waving that sword around. It's like, I'm a warrior, look at me. You're not accomplishing anything there. And I think the hardest part is working with someone to find, like, okay, like, slow down, step back, whether it's to chill out, man. Like, you have some really, really good skills or leadership principles that you have learned. You could be a phenomenal leader, but like, this is in the military. You don't just run around screaming. Not to say that everybody in the military is running around screaming at each other. Yeah, especially not in the Air Force, right?
Did I hear you say chair force?
I think it was pointing to the running part. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got my marathon things are downstairs. Sorry.
But so, that really, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna kind of contrast what I've heard between both of you. As David, you're talking knife hands. I heard Ted talking about collaboration and different things like that. So, switching gears a little bit, I want to hear more about this. starting with the Air Force, what that leadership style is really like, because regardless of the branch, it seems like when we get people into the manufacturing, especially, we start to lose them for all the same reasons. But it sounds like it's drastically different on the leadership side in between these two branches anyways. Is that, go ahead, Ted. I could ramble on all day.
Yeah. So for me, first, the thing that veterans, especially on a transition, have to go from, I was, again, 25 when I was leaving, 26 when I was leaving the military, leading 154 people, spending a count of $10 million. And my first job, I was leading a team of 45, and it's a night and day difference. And it's a really hard shift to come from a higher level within, the military, and then literally have to take a step or two down to enter into the civilian world. Now, it doesn't mean I wasn't promoted twice very quickly, right? But for people, it can be a very difficult transition, because now they went from leading, especially, and if we're going to focus on the leadership side, you're leading at a higher level, usually with higher performing. Higher performing would be a relative term within the military, right? But it's a different type of individual, right? And so, but for us in the military, in the Air Force especially, and on the leadership side, we still had, we used to say we'd eat our young in the military, because they used to just chew you up and spit you out. And that's kind of what maintenance or manufacturing maintenance operations can still do, right? But we really started to build in a continuous improvement mindset. And so going through ROTC in the early 2000s, I was in college in ROTC when September 11th happened. We knew we were going to war, and we had a real focus on, it's not just going to be a charge type of thing anymore. It is going to be let's leverage everybody on the team, because I cannot be an expert when I'm leading 154 people on all of their jobs. How do I leverage them? And how do I then pull in my other outside resources from my team to be able to learn from after action reports, and to be able to learn from everything that we've got going on? And that kind of, for me, I was very fortunate, because that really opened up the doors, and it made a smoother transition for me. And actually, a couple of my Air Force veterans that are retired, they have went into Procter & Gamble, they've gone into Grainger, one into supply chain, and then now doing capital projects. And the other one went into sales. The first person ever hired directly from the military into a sales at this level of a sales position. No, and it's amazing, because it's all about collaboration and partnerships. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to see a lot of the people that I've worked with too be able to have a little bit smoother transition, because of you still had to eat your young, but you still had the expectation to work together. It wasn't I'm the leader, I'm going to make this decision and get it done. And it was awesome. And I do see some of my peers. I just had a Marine transition into the civilian world after retiring. He's doing well, but it was definitely a struggle. He's like, I feel like a corporal out there again, walking, because he was struggling, but he's doing well now. But it was a much more of a struggle for me. And so I think the more we can find those ways, whether or not it's built into your culture, within the military, because I'm sure there's other Air Force people that have never seen anything like I'm talking about, right? Because it's not a branch-wide thing. But being again, like we were talking about earlier, being focused, making your action list, and trying to force yourself to learn about it and do it is going to smooth that transition.
Right. So I heard a real big common point in between what you were just saying there and what David was saying earlier. And a lot of it was around, people transitioning and the ego, right? So you had mentioned, you had this big, huge, group of people, and now you're slivered down to this. That had to have been a real big hit on your ego, just right out of the gate. They build you up real quick in the military, right? And now you're going to kind of plinko down, right?
Right. But I think that's where, and even to go back a little bit, what Dave was talking about a little bit ago, that's where the discipline and not just the trust in your team, but the discipline and trust within yourself. Because how many veterans do we see that, they stop working out, they stop going, they stop learning, they stop doing all these things because they're like, I've been there and done that. right? And it's
Mhm.
like that's a huge thing that I think veterans just in general are, and not speaking, for all of them, but in general, there are so many of them that I see that as soon as they leave and they lose that brotherhood, they lose that structure, they lose that forced discipline. They don't have that internal discipline to be able to then say, okay, put the ego down. I'm going to do the best in this role because this is what I have and this is what I'm going to do well, right? And it's not just in that. It's going back to school. It's with your family. It's working out. It's keeping yourself in shape. It's all these things that I think that are being missed by so many military as they're transitioning out, and they lose that. They need to have that fire inside. They can't just rely on the military to keep it going for them and so if they do that when they're in, that's also going to make it much more likely that they're going to fail or struggle. I won't say fail, struggle on the outside.
Right. And it's interesting too, because that goes back to that purpose piece as well, because you feel like you're doing something that's so incredible. You're helping your country, you're helping these things. And then now you're down here doing this, management of 5 people instead of a battalion, or who knows? I mean, I've heard some crazy stories about guys dropping down, and it's, here you are. What am I doing? What am I really doing with my life? I used to do these incredible things, and then now you've got this attitude that's carrying over into the new workplace, and this attitude that's affecting them. That's the depression. There's so many layers there where really identity and purpose is so huge for somebody coming out. But I think when you think of military leadership, what's the strength of military leadership? It's direct. It's direct. It's organized. You have to work as a team. I think of a good military leader, and again, I'm not an expert. I'm in the National Guard. I didn't spend 20 years active duty. But the idea, the good leaders are the ones that build up those around them, that support them. They build that camaraderie. You look at, Major Winters. Geez, how many books on him? And Band of Brothers, obviously the show. You look at what he did, how he encouraged. He wasn't somebody who was out there. I mean, he'd get on people if he needed to. That's a great example. Here's a guy who was very successful as a leader in the military, and then those same principles carry over into the civilian life. And so theoretically speaking, the principles are there in good leaders in the military, and if they can carry that over into civilian life, it's awesome, because you may not have learned the importance of brotherhood and I say brotherhood, but of camaraderie amongst a work unit. You may not have learned the importance of being direct and like, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. Everything in the military, if you're going to do something, there's about 10 layers of planning and scheduling that goes into it. But that's really helpful, because some kid who maybe went to college and now he's in a job, he's not going to have that. Like he said, forced discipline at a time where he learned all these principles, and now he can carry that over. I mean, you look at Jocko. Why is Jocko so successful? Because so many of the things that he's done in the military absolutely carry over into civilian life. And so you really can take people, again, ego, if the ego's not there and there's some vision and purpose in there, man, you can get some phenomenal leaders who know how to really rally people around them, and I think can be ultra successful.
And that's where Jocko also always says, motivation is great, but it's not going to always get the job done. It's the discipline, right? And that's huge. It's something that you hear a lot about motivation, but it's that discipline.
So I'm gonna rub it in your face a little bit, David.
Okay.
Ted and I were both with the same company at the same time, where we got to do some training with Jocko's crew. So it was phenomenal.
Awesome.
A couple of them.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, we did a couple of them. It was quite fun. Now, I will say this, though. You have to beware of those types of things, because they are amazing. And it's funny because it was ingrained in me, right? From minute one, I'm like, this is nothing new. This is how I live my life. That's what I was thinking. However, you also have to be on guard when you're using those types of things outside of when an entire organization, or the vast majority of an organization, is not buying in. Because then what happens is, then you start hanging your own self out to dry if you take on too much. Now, it doesn't say that you don't take ownership, right? But you have to be very careful about how you do it. And I used to love a few of the leaders within the organization would say then in a meeting, well, in the spirit of extreme ownership. And I'm like, if you have to say that, I'm not listening
That's your
anymore.
ego talking right there.
And those are the same people that were paying it lip service, right? But then were hanging everybody else out to dry as soon as they could. So it's one of those where you have to be very, very careful. It's a great thing when it works, but everybody has to start buying in. Otherwise, it hangs some people out to dry.
Yeah,
agreed. Yeah, nah, it definitely worked in the small group setting. As you know, I was running a small team that was very effective, and it worked well in that environment. But yeah, I get where you're coming from and the rest.
Yeah, and to see where Steve was when I was there just a few years ago and where he's at now, it's quite amazing. So
it's only awesome. 80 pounds difference.
I think I took about 8 of them.
Well, I'll keep on giving them. So, we talked a lot about, transitioning and, the reasons in between when someone is really successful in that transition and then when other people struggle. A lot of it seems to come down to really being locked into a purpose and a vision and being able to transition well. When you're looking at, 140 direct reports that you believe are high functioning, which I do want to call that out for a second, Ted. Going from the people that I had in a corporate environment to becoming a plant manager, I definitely had to change my mindset with people. Still great people, but they are of a different caliber, right? I mean, there's not a lot of free thought, on the production lines, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's a different type. And so, yeah, thanks. The wording was not the best, but it's a different type, right? And so because we've seen the military people go in and work on the production lines and, not even be able to handle that. So it's not that there's, one that's better than the other. It's a different culture and a different structure that then breeds a different approach, and then level of training that you get in the military, even as a young 18-year-old, the level of training that you get is far and above what you're ever going to get in the civilian realm. And so it's just designed different. And so therefore it requires different approaches.
Right. And, if there's a leader work, you know what I'm talking
Leader
about.
Standard work.
Leader standard work. There you go. I'm not a continuous improvement guy, and that's really what the military gives you above and beyond manufacturing, right? Is that people know what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing it, and execute on that assignment, right? And then you create those opportunities for the camaraderie, like what David was saying, and everybody's got the same purpose. So beyond that, right, you got to take that purpose from just, okay, I'm leading 140 high caliber people strong, to, okay, what's my real purpose, right? And that's to feed and clothe my family. It's to, follow the Lord as David would. It's to, whatever that vision for you is. It's to, have the house up in the mountains, that have the white shutters on it, or whatever the case is, right?
Right.
And that's, from hearing from you both, that's really what I've locked into, that we need to focus on to transition these military people from one side to the other, right? Is get that purpose reestablished and really work with them on that end. What do you want out of life? Not what do you want out of a job, right?
Right. Great point. Great distinction. And I think when I think of, okay, what can we do as leaders in the civilian world to engage, support, and encourage our veterans that are coming in? That's one of the biggest things, is summoning them. And especially if we're talking men, I can speak most directly with men. We don't want to be preached at. We don't want to be yelled at. We want to be summoned into something greater, but like by other men. We want to be summoned into, you look at the movie Braveheart, when William Wallace goes riding up and down. What does he do? He calls to those men and he summons them into battle. He speaks something into them. Well, that's what we want as men. We want another, leader to summon us. Hey, like, I'm going to pull you into something with me. That's what we want. So how do we do that? We engage. You don't know a man until you know his story. So if you look at veterans that are coming in and there's some things going on, take the time to learn their story a little bit, because you may realize like there's a lot going on behind the scenes that they're working through after 18 years as a Green Beret in the Army or something. You have no idea what kind of trauma they could be working through, what kind of family struggles they could be dealing with because of all the deployments and things like that. So to give a little grace initially in that and get to know them, and then what do you want with your life? Summon them into that rather than just like, hey man, I just want you to be really good at your job. And again, that's that camaraderie piece too, is we can as well, if we're helping veterans transition, summon them into the camaraderie. They're looking for it, and maybe they're not sure how to create that in the civilian world, but as a leader to be aware, like, I'm going to pull you in. Hey, let's build that camaraderie. And then out of that, often you get to start to understand somebody's story, and it's going to help inform you on like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's how I can support them better and engage them better. And again, those of us who are leaders who know these principles about vision and purpose and stuff, you can just start slowly pulling. It's going to speak to especially a military guy, because these are all things he's been thinking about in the military. He knows what it's like to have a purpose that's bigger than him. So how do you kind of pull them into that and engage them in that? I think that's huge.
Yeah, that last sentence really caught me, right? And it solidified a lot of what we've been talking about. Their purpose has been like what we started the show. It was about something bigger than themselves at that moment. And it's almost like they die when their military service is done, right? I mean, that, you keep on talking about men, and I'm going to, we're in the same group, but men have to be tied to purpose, right? I think that's why we generally pass away when we retire, right? Because we've lost our purpose.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's almost like a virtual death at the end of the military. So how do you get them to be reborn, right? So Ted, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to kind of go a little bit with what Dave said too, as far as the how do we help the transition. So one of the organizations I was with, Fortune 300 company, they did not, we wanted to hire more veterans. And the next thing becomes then how do you retain the veterans after you hire them, right? But how do you hire them? And so actually working with a team, and it was with veterans, with spouses and non-veterans. We put together a training program. It was about an hour and a half training program for talent acquisition and for hiring managers to help relate, what they may see on resumes and how that equates, or what a rank usually will equate to on the civilian side. So that way it gives them a good sense of what the veterans bring to the table. And the good thing is that when we created that program, because this was all for a good cause, it was not considered, they had no problem sharing it with other organizations once we created and implemented it. And I found out, years later, it is actually still being utilized. I'm actually looking at, I spoke with the head of the employee resource group of the company I'm at now, and they're like, hey, we're looking for something like this. I'm like, well, great. We just got to tailor it a little bit, right, from my previous organization to this one. But my focus has been, how do I help veterans transition as far as building their resumes, preparing them for interviews, and mentally preparing them for more of the, you're not going to necessarily get exactly what you got, in the military. And a lot of them can't handle hearing that. I know I struggled to hear it, but I still, again, put the ego aside, as you said earlier, Steve. But a lot of them are going to struggle to hear that. The other piece is that if anybody ever needs, a training program just to lay the foundation for your organization to gain a better understanding of how to translate some of what you're hearing and some of the benefits that come from it, I'll be your person. I've got a training program that I'd be happy to share, because it's all about, doing what's right and taking care of those who, have really sacrificed so much, but don't necessarily know exactly how to get, like we've been talking about, get to where they want to be, whether they know it or not yet. We got to the more we can do to help them, the better.
No, agreed, 100%. Man, this has been awesome. I like how we got the front end and kind of back end all tied together in between you two as well. You know, the hiring and the training to make sure that they understand, and then, you know, the longevity piece that David was mentioning, tying to purpose and all that. I think I got some marching orders out of all this. You know, I don't know if well, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I don't know how deep I went, but I was actually, you know, coming out of high school, I was an anarchist. I don't know if I knew what the word meant, but I sure as hell wanted to be one, right? You know, I was into drugs and alcohol and, you know, all that stuff coming out of high school, you know, mad at the world, whatever. And then, you know, kind of like you guys, I started having a wife and kids, and, you know, all of a sudden I had two adult. So, you know, all of a sudden I'm a Republican, and you know how it goes.
Yeah. Next thing you know.
So you don't have that shirt that says "I can't adult today." Every time I see that, I'm like, oh.
So going back to what you were saying, Ted, about the, you know, kind of the translation. What does it really mean when someone's got a certain position? You know, I don't know the levels, but I can remember someone sitting in my office one time, and we were looking at a resume, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you don't want them for this position if they're not an, I don't know, E5." If that makes sense? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm like, does that mean Edward has 5 fingers on his hand?
Or if a guy's been in he's been in for 15 years and he's still an E4 or an E5, right? That's usually those are the indicators that we were trying to train, you know, because believe me, not everybody coming from the military is top notch. I mean, of course, it's just like any other organization, right? You've got your upper quadrant, you've got your middle quadrant, and then you've got your bottom quartile, and so it's not everybody coming out's great. So it does help identify those types of things as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think just for marching orders for me, I'm definitely going to look into your program, Ted, on the training program, because I need it. I have no clue what any of those military terms mean. All I know is you guys got fantastic haircuts. The second thing is really sitting down and getting to know somebody, you know, and it's kind of hard in the HR world that we live in, of course, you know, but what should be important to the employee should be important to the leader, right? Mm-hmm. So that gives us a way in to try and understand their purpose and vision. And then I think we need to be honest with these people too, right? You know, I know there's a lot of leaders out there who want to glorify the jobs that they have and whatever else. But sometimes, you know what? This job's going to work 7 days a week for about half the year, guy. Right? Mm-hmm. Is that what you want to meet your goals? Right? So we need to be honest. Mm-hmm. And then overall, we need to just get them part of that team and engage to higher missions. So I don't know. Did I leave anything out of that?
No, I think you hit it really well. It really is one of the best interviews I've had recently was with a company here in the Flathead Valley. I was blown away. They really pushing trying to hire veterans. And it was such a different interview, my first interview. I sat down and he's just like, "So, tell me what you've done." That was how he started the interview. And I was like, man, that's incredible. And when I think of that as far as military guys, especially if you've been active duty for a long time, just to sit down and be like, "Tell me what you've done. Like, what have you done with your life? What are your strengths?" And just, he's not pulling out my resume. He's not pulling all that stuff. Right. And it gave me a chance to just talk about, here's the things I've done that didn't necessarily translate specifically like an MOS in the military. Like he's saying, like, that's awesome, that program you have. Because most people have no idea even what an MOS is, let alone what each of them are. And military occupational...
AFSC, Air Force Specialty Codes. We each have our own too, so we have different ones in there. Our Army does, and
and I just totally had a brain fart on the S, but specialty, military occupational specialty. But to be able to get it to, in my own words, talk about like, here's how this relates to your company, and he literally was like, "I think you'd be a project manager." Cool. I would never have gone on the website and thought, I'm going to apply for a project manager position because I wouldn't have thought that I was qualified because I haven't literally been a project manager before or something like that. But if you're able to open doors like that and in the interview process, just find out, like, tell me what you've done. It makes them feel valued, number one, and their experience is valuable in the military. But then also you may realize, like, holy smokes, like this guy's got project manager skills here, or he's whatever, it's something higher level than he probably would have thought he could have applied for.
It's interesting that you say that too, that you would have never applied for that job, right? I was just talking to my HR manager here the other day and of course she told me I was stupid, but I told her, take all the writing away from our job descriptions. Let's do video job descriptions and show people what the jobs are. Right?
Revolutionary. You're breaking down that fourth wall.
Anyways, we should probably wrap this up. I know that you guys got families to get back to, so definitely appreciate you guys on the show. This is going to make this show a ton better. My little podcast here. So
thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Beyond that, thank you for your service and all the insight that you gave the listeners here. So really appreciate it. And man, I got a lot of insight out of this, and I'm going to take some things and go straight over to the HR office in the morning, and we're going to have a discussion.
You didn't make her stay there while you're there now?
I got to go home to my family at some point too. They kicked me out tonight, of course, because they didn't go to gymnastics. I'm going to guess that someone's got some snivels or something, today's world. So anyways, just kind of wrapping this up. I want to invite all the listeners to give this show a rating and a review. That's how we grow and get more content out there like this. Also, if you could be so kind, hit that subscribe button on whatever podcasting app you're listening to this on. And really, just once again, thank you to the guests. And, don't just listen to this podcast and go, oh, that was good, right? Let's take away some valuable lessons from this podcast and put them to use and try and help those people who are transitioning from the military into the civilian life. They can be great employees. It's not the person, it's the process that we're lacking, right? It's really us as civilian leaders not closing the gap for these men and women coming out of the military. So let's close that gap and really put this information that we learned today to use. So
if I can jump in real quick, Demi always said you put a good person in with a bad process, and guess what's going to happen?
100%. Yeah, he had a few good nuggets, didn't he? All right. Well, with that, let's wrap up this episode of the Fireforge Leader Podcast. On our next episode, I invite another veteran, Dr. John Ross. He's a best-selling author of 2 phenomenal books in the maintenance and reliability space. And we will be talking about investing in others and really identifying gaps and being able to fill them. So we'll see you next week when that episode drops, and this will be coming out on Veterans Day. Once again, thank you guys, and that's a wrap.